Who are you and why are you here? Have you ever asked yourself these questions? Welcome to Rekindle XM, where we dive into stress management, beating burnout, and erupting into a life of purpose and passion. I'm your host, Michelle, and I'm joined today by Brian and Masha. In today's episode, we are diving into finding our worthy ideal, including the 3 barriers you may encounter, 3 areas of life to think about, and finally, 3 practical tips to help you on your self-discovery journey towards your worthy ideal. So let's dive in. And first of all, what is this thing called a worthy ideal? Brian and Masha and I all first heard this when we listened to an old Earl Nightingale recording. And I think we adopted this term and like it because it's very similar to finding your purpose, but it has just a little bit of nuance to it. Personally, I like it because I think purpose is kind of this big, overwhelming thing sometimes that it's hard to wrap our heads around, versus a worthy ideal where it feels like, oh, I can find something worthwhile to do with my life. So Masha, Brian, what are your thoughts on this term worthy ideal? What does that mean to you? And how does that fit in with purpose?
Great question, Michelle. I think to understand worthy ideal, we have to unpack it just a little bit. So to me, worthy ideal is beyond just having a goal and to do something valuable with my time. Yes, I definitely want to do something valuable with my time, but worthy ideal goes a lot deeper. It really looks at your vision for life, your inspiration, your gifts and your talents, what inspires your soul and your heart. What will you be doing your whole life that is not considered work, but a life well lived? Is that a life of service? You can love to do and to teach and be a teacher. And to you, that's a life well lived if you are an educator bringing value to your students. It may not be making a lot of money, but your purpose is to be an educator. Similarly, for finding a worthy ideal, it transcends beyond the daily mundane tasks. It really taps into the deepest purpose and values. You started out the podcast, well, who are you and what are you doing here? It's finding that answer.
Brian, do you think it's the same thing as purpose, or would you say there's a little bit of a difference?
I think there are many worthy ideals. It just means it depends on how you define purpose. So your worthy ideal can be many different things. It doesn't have to be work related. It doesn't have to be house related. It has to just be the thing that you find important to you at the moment, and it's a service to others. And I don't think it ever really becomes a purpose until you act on it. If you don't act on it, trying to create it, then it's not really a purpose to me. It's just an idea.
Okay. So it sounds like you both see a tie-in with purpose, but it's not exactly the same, perhaps. I think that worthy ideal is a little bit more of the concept, and perhaps the concept that leads us to our purpose. Brian, I think you point out something. We'll go over it in a little bit more detail, but some of these things can change a little bit throughout life as well. So I kind of like the idea of a worthy ideal just from that perspective of it's saying you're going to do something worthwhile with your time and the life that you live here. Whereas, with the purpose, maybe that's a little bit more specific. And like Brian says, where we actually put some shoes to that and we decide exactly how we're going to walk that out. So good debate. I don't know that there's a right or wrong answer, whether worthy ideal is the same as purpose, whether there's a difference. But in my mind, there's just a little bit of difference between the two. But let's talk a little bit more, and it's fine if we interchange them for the purpose of this interview, but what are the reasons why we even want to think about this? Why do we need a worthy ideal? Why do we need a purpose? Is that important to us?
There's a great depth to that. If you are living a life with your aligned purpose and worthy ideal, it brings self-value and self-esteem. You're doing something meaningful. You're seeing the impact it's doing, not just in your life, but people that you're impacting. It gives you more of a purpose and direction. It motivates and brings you resilience. You're no longer, looking at the clock, am I done with work today? You're constantly thinking, well, what can I do now? Maybe it's just a 1% improvement today that I can do that's going to have significant compounded benefit over time. And if you function in a space of authenticity and fulfillment, it's going to bring really positive impact to your life around, to life for people around you, health, mental health, physical health, just brainstorming lots of things of why we do want to live a life worth living with purpose and passion. It will keep you healthy physically and mentally.
And Masha, the research actually supports that. So there has been some research on finding your purpose. And
I didn't get a talk on this yet.
Oh, don't worry. We're coming back to you. I just want to point out that what Masha is saying actually agrees that they found that those who do have a sense of purpose do have overall healthier and longer lives. So you're right. There's a direct tie-in with that. All right, Brian, your turn.
My history of burnout is a prime example of not following a worthy ideal and a purpose. I went in there with skill sets that I readily had and could easily do, but I didn't see it as my purpose, and I quickly became bored and unfulfilled. I upgraded to engineering, but the same thing. I didn't feel that it wasn't what I would consider my purpose, but I had the skill set for it, and I considered myself really good at it, but it wasn't fulfilling to me. So my life became a lot more miserable as I started continuing down a path that did not provide the enjoyment and the peace that following your worthy ideal and your purpose will bring you.
And that's a really good call out. In fact, so I'm going to bring a little research into your answer as well. There was a study published recently, and it was talking about the fact that there's less burnout in entrepreneurs, which is interesting because they often work longer hours. They're working sometimes 7 days a week, very long days, and yet their burnout percentage in comparison to the rest of the working population is less. What's really interesting is the conclusion they drew. And the conclusion was that the reason why entrepreneurs didn't burn out, it wasn't because there was something so radically different about them as people, except for the fact that they were living out their purpose. They all had a purpose in entrepreneurship. And so it's interesting how you point that out. You were really good at what you did. You were an engineer. You were, a respected professional, but yet you burned out. And this purpose plays a big part of that and not burning out.
I agree with that to an extent. I have experienced entrepreneurship for a decade and a half, and that's true. There is purpose and there's the drive. And what drives you is that element of service to your customers. You want to bring value and you want to have the reputation that you want to keep with your clientele base. I think in entrepreneurship, there is definitely a layer of burnout, which is not primary the business that you're doing. It's other elements that layer over like an onion, your financial situations, collecting cash flow, when a customer's supposed to pay you in 15, they pay you in 90 days instead of 15 days. You take it all in and you are all in. So I think it takes a while longer for us to be burned out there. And the business itself may not be the cause of it, but it's definitely at the core because it's your baby, right? Now you have a baby outside of your home and you're nurturing it and taking care of it. So it's an interesting perspective.
It is. And, certainly burnout happens to entrepreneurs. Burnout happens to people in the service industry. Burnout can happen to really anyone, any profession. It's just interesting that the conclusion they drew of why there was less burnout happened to be that one word, which was purpose in life. But as we all know, we can have a purpose in entrepreneurship. We can have a purpose in our day-to-day jobs. We can have a purpose in our family life. So there's multiple areas where that purpose can come in. So overall, it does tend to lead towards a more healthy, both mental health, physical health lifestyle. One of the other interesting study findings is that it does generally tend to lead to better financial success. So people who report that they are living out their purpose in life, they also tend to, in the end, do better financially. And we've all, we're all fans of Earl Nightingale. We know that if you're serving well, money follows. It's not always 100%,
Yes.
but
I don't
go
think
ahead.
it's that interesting. I think it's just, it's very relatable. If you enjoy what you're doing, you're going to do a really good job at it, and you're going to get noticed at it, and you're going to be able to excel at it more. Where if you don't like what you're doing, you're going to struggle at it. And even if you're doing your job and doing a good job, you're not going to get as much attention as the people that really enjoy what they're doing and are doing it well.
Yeah.
Because they're happier at work, and they're happier in all of the activities that they're doing at work. And it's just an overall better situation. So,
yeah, absolutely. And I think that having that purpose and being happy in what we're doing, those you kind of tied those together for us. And I think that's absolutely true, that being happy and enjoying what we're doing and having a purpose do definitely tie in together. So we don't always talk about this in relation to our day-to-day work and what we do. And in fact, there are a lot of people out there who may not know their purpose yet. It took all of us a little bit of time to recover from burnout and find a new purpose. And we've walked through some of that. But if you think about attempting to find your purpose, nobody comes and tells you what your purpose is. It's often a challenge to truly discover it. So what are some barriers that we encounter on our road towards trying to live a life of purpose? So I think one of them, and I'm interested to hear what you two say as well, but the one that came to mind for me is busyness and distraction. We're so busy that I often feel like we don't even have time to think about our purpose. Or let's say we went into a job, a career, or we chose to stay home and be a wife and mother or a dad and father. We probably went into it with some sense of purpose, but I think over time we can get so busy that we sort of lose our sense of purpose. So that to me is one barrier, is just busyness and distraction of life. What about for you guys? What do you think are some barriers to finding our purpose and finding that worthy ideal?
some of it goes back to, again, if you've been in a situation for too long and you're not in that purpose, you're starting to get really stressed out. And when you're really stressed out, you don't think very well. That was my biggest problem, is I knew my skills, but my skills didn't equate to something that gave me passion. And it wasn't until we started writing the book that's coming out in January 7th to 2025, pre-orders coming soon.
And cover reveal.
Big cover reveal. But it wasn't until we started writing this book that I started realizing what some of my talents were and skills that did provide me with that passion and ideal that I could go with and still be a service and enjoy doing. So it's hard to get past what you're doing sometimes to see beyond it, depending on what your situation is. And it can be very hard to get out of a situation to where you can find that. So
I think the main barrier, the biggest barrier there is how we teach our kids what to dream, whom to become, and start, that influence early on based on people's skills. You may be great at math, but you may not love being an engineer, right? So we tend to push our kids from young age based on their skills and talents, thinking that's their dreams. I think what we need to do is redefine that a little bit. And this is something I've done differently with my kid because I've been told, Masha, you need to go in international business. That's where the money is. Well, I tried international business, and week one, I was like, take me out of this. This is not for me. I cannot survive in this environment in an internship. But inspiring our younger generation to dream. What do they want to do in life? How do they want to serve and be served? What role do they play in the society? And finding their peace, not just based on their skills, but based on their dreams and their passions and aspirations. I think this is how we can prevent burnout and really equip kids and people or young adults building meaningful lives. But for me as an adult, I didn't go through those exercises. I went to what does logically make sense to become so I can somewhat enjoy it, but it wasn't really a contributing factor. It was mostly what am I going to be good at and what makes great money and has, limited glass ceiling that I can grow as much as I can. But once the burnout hit home, right, you do want to reinvent your life. And I started to dream, like, what do I want to do? But the main contributing factor to me was fear. I am here. I have my expenses are X, my income is Y, and it has to equal to this, right? So you tend to overstay your welcome. You tend to, suffer a little more because it's scary to become an author and be successful right off the bat and be a content creator and inspire people to do the things that, we're doing and figuring out along the way. It's difficult. But once you start dreaming, what I've learned is that fear starts to kind of evaporate and you become inspired. Another limitation that I've noticed is that when you start sharing your dreams and your goals with people around you, like your loved ones, they'll say, oh, Masha, crazy. No, that's not you. I don't see you doing this. So they don't help to inspire you to walk into your dream. So what I found is I get a different support system who does see me excel in what my worthy ideal is and help cheerlead you along. And the rest of the people who are not the greatest supporters, they get to find out after the fact. Hey, we finished the book, we're written it. Wait, what? I never knew that you were, an author. I'm like, well, I've always been an author in heart. I've never had the confidence to pursue it because English was not my first language, and I had low confidence in that area.
So, Masha, fear actually is a very common thing that is called out that keeps us from finding our purpose. And I would say maybe along with that, and I'm curious on your opinions, fear and conformity together, because Masha, I heard you talk about how we're raised. And what I heard from you was we're often conforming to other people's ideas of who they think we should be and how we should live our life. And it might be society, it might be our parents, it could be other people. But how do those two go together? Because I think you hit on a couple of big points there. And Brian, you can jump in too.
Looking at Brian because it looks like he was going to say something. Go for it. I'm psyched to hear what you have to say on this.
No, I'm just wondering why my wife always goes after you first for answers. Anyway, what was the question again?
How do fear and conformity go together? Because I heard a little bit of both of those in Masha's story.
Well, and it goes in my story too. I mean, fear of success is probably one of the biggest fears there. You want success, but you're afraid to get it because once you get it, you don't know what to do. So it's that step-by-step process. But also, I don't think there's anybody out there that's wanted to do something that's unusual or not in the norm that hasn't had to fight family and close friends that don't understand why you're making those big changes. So you do have to move past the fear and the conformity to be able to get to where you want to go.
And you said something else, Brian, that I want to revisit because in my research, So the three that were called out, one was just distractions, busyness, and settling. So essentially, your life is your life and you're not willing to change it, which you touched on too, Brian. The second one was fear. The third one actually was an upper limit challenge or a mindset. And I heard you say something about that. And Masha, you said the same thing, where it's like, maybe it's coming from family, where they're like, oh no, you can't do that. There's no way you're smart enough. You're not creative enough. You're not whatever. And whether it comes from inside us, and sometimes we tell ourselves that, or from someone else, that idea of, I'm not enough to do whatever that purpose is, whatever's really in my heart to do. I'm afraid to do it, or I don't feel like I can do it.
Right on. Absolutely. And we hear that a lot. We hear that from our educators. We hear that from our parents. We hear it from people around us. They say no a lot. I think if we record ourselves around just in an educator type of role when we're coaching or tutoring, we tend to say no a lot. Well, instead of saying no, you can't, how about we say, yes, go figure it out, make mistakes and find your way through it. I think that would enable us as adults and our children to not have fear to pursue the things they don't know how to pursue, yet they will make mistakes along the way, but they will succeed. The only way to failure is not acting out on the things you need to act out on, is quitting.
Yeah, there's one thing I think we're forgetting though is um, a worthy ideal in any purpose requires faith in that idea and that purpose. Earl Nightingale talks about that as well. And I think that's a very important thing to remember is if you don't have faith in the idea that you're working towards or the purpose that you're working towards, you're not going to be able to attain it anyway, because that is that belief that you can get there and that you can do that. So
Yeah, and thanks for pointing that out. I think that goes along a little bit with the idea of our mindset, and that's a barrier sometimes that we have to overcome. But I also think you're right, which is faith. We have to have faith in something. If you ultimately believe that you are just a random group of cells, it's hard to find a purpose or a reason to exist. And so there is a little bit of that. You have to have some kind of faith that your life can have a purpose and that it's important for it to have a purpose. So yes, I agree.
okay, but where do faith and mindset separate? Do they really separate?
Good question. Masha?
Where does faith and mindset separate? I think one drives the other. I think if our mindset is fixed and we're stuck in the victim mindset, right? We can be a victim or we can be a victor. And if we say, I can't, you're not going to have faith that you can or you could. And I think in order for us to have faith, we have to open up our hearts that there are influences greater than self that the ego can achieve. And my experience and my walk, I believe in God, and I see his fingerprints all over my life. Where I thought I couldn't, it happened because I chose not to have faith in myself. I chose to have faith in my creator. And when I do that, things do happen, and miraculously most of the time, like, whoa, I could have not come up with a better solution. It just worked out the way it did, not something I could have created on my own.
But I'm hearing an awful lot these days about fixed mindset and growth mindset and how one's bad and the other one's important. And you are a mix of both regardless of what happens. And even a person that has a negative fixed mindset, that is their belief that they have that mindset. So they believe that that is what they are. And that also sets their mindset.
Well, and you can
So
have
they kind of go hand in hand because to me, when you get, especially on a worthy ideal, your mindset is your belief and it is your faith. If you don't believe you can do it, you're not going to have a mindset to do it. So I don't think you can separate them.
So what do you think?
I do think they go hand in hand, but interestingly, regardless of your mindset, you can still find and have a purpose, but you may not be able to sort of evolve in that purpose, I guess, is what I would say. Because, we go back and we just finished reading a book on mindset, and there's been some amazing pro athletes who had a fixed mindset and yet reached the top of their game. But they weren't able to evolve beyond that, in the sense that once they reached the top of their career and they were on the downward side, they struggled. So they weren't able to continue to evolve because of that fixed mindset. Okay, let's move on, because we're actually going to retouch on some of these things. Oh,
Before
Masha,
we do,
go. I can see one more point.
I have a question. How do you find your purpose, your worthy ideal, if you are stuck in a fixed mindset that you can't, and this is your life? You made a box for yourself and you can't get out of it. Answer that question, I'll believe you.
So you can still have a purpose. And in fact,
I'm not saying no. She can't just say my name and then keep going.
Oh, okay.
I'm saying that fixed mindset and growth mindset is what everybody has. You have very fixed mindsets about some things, because your faith is a fixed mindset.
I'm not arguing with that. I'm just saying that how can one person...
So that's all I was trying to say, is that fixed mindset and growth mindset is a little bit about what everybody has.
In other words, we all have a mix
either
of
way
it.
is belief. Yes.
Yeah. So, all right, let's move on, because we're going to come back to a few of these concepts. But all right, so the barriers: busyness, distraction, settling for where you're at. That's the first one. Second one is fear. Third one is limiting beliefs or mindsets. Next, let's talk about 3 areas of our lives to consider. So all 3 of us, I believe, have read books on finding your passion and purpose. I think we've all read or are familiar with 48 Days to Work You Love. And you can walk through a set of different exercises to try to determine your purpose or your worthy ideal. But when summing them up, they kind of fall into 3 different areas. So one is self-reflection. What do you know about yourself? So, what did you enjoy as a child? What naturally makes you light up and makes you feel alive? Where do you enjoy serving others? That's one area. The second one is feedback from other people. So people in our lives who we trust, who we respect. We listen to the feedback they give us, because sometimes they may see things in us that we don't see in ourselves. And then the third area is our experiences in life. So the more you're exposed to different experiences throughout life, you start to learn more and more about what do you like, what do you not like, what naturally do you enjoy doing versus not. So it's sort of a combination of those 3 areas. So what do you guys think? Does that sound like, a good place to start, at least, is self-reflecting, what others say, and third, what are your experiences?
Yeah, I think all 3 of those fit in there, but it's kind of hard to get feedback sometimes. And you got to be careful with the feedback. So you got to have somebody that you truly knows you and you truly trust. And they may refuse to give you feedback because they don't want to hurt your feelings, or they just don't want to go in that direction. So you need to find the right people if you're going to go ask feedback.
I think you can get there, but again, you have to overcome the last set of points, which are the barriers. Once you overcome the barriers and you are on a mission, I'm on a mission to figure out what is my worthy ideal, what is my purpose. And I've had experience with all 3 of those things: the self-reflection, feedback from others, and experiences. When you are stuck in that chaos of busyness, and once we welcome it, it's everywhere. It welcomes itself, even if you don't say yes to it. You don't have time for self-reflection. You don't have time to ask for feedback, nor are you interested in it, nor do you have the ability to consider your experiences. That is the time when I feel like I cannot get to those things. I say, you know what? Bye, I'm leaving. I leave my environment where chaos prevails, and I find the self-reflection and meditate and pray on my experiences in isolation. Like, I'm in Fort Myers, Florida right now in our home, and my had a very amazing solo time. Like, I spent a week just reflecting and considering my experiences and really trying to set the direction and consider my purpose and worthy ideal. In the past, when I was making the transition into, living a purposeful life within my worthy ideal, there was one of the exercises which was ask 3 people for feedback on your best attributes and on things you could improve in. And of course, you ask the people, and some of them are really scared to give you negative feedback. But others who did, they have given the attributes like, what are you really good at? And a couple of people mentioned something I have never considered. I'm like, oh, that is, but I was not aware of it. So when you do bring other people in, like you have to give permission. I give you permission to tell me the good and bad. It's not a moment of judgment. It's really a moment of self-growth. And once you welcome that and people understand why you're asking for that, you can get some really incredible feedback from. And the same way, I ask for feedback on what can I improve on all the time because I do want to be aware of things that could grow in. It's an opportunity. It's not an opportunity for resentment. It's really opportunity to grow. How do people view you and what can you excel in that you may have never considered? And you'll never know unless you ask.
That's a really good point, is that you have to be willing sometimes to go and ask. You also have to be willing to receive. I think all three of us have gone through years and years of our annual performance reviews at work. And, that's usually this, do I have to? Because at that point, often we may or may not be willing to receive that particular feedback, depending on your relationship with your boss. It can be good, but I think that's really important, that one, you're asking for it, and two, you're willing to receive it.
There's a hack.
And three, that the person is someone you want to receive it from.
There is a hack to performance reviews.
Yes.
And I'll tell it after Brian gives his feedback.
Well, there was no performance reviews. We put our stuff down, he put his stuff down, that was it. There was only one or two bosses that actually gave me any type of review. And no, I may not have taken that very well because I wasn't used to that type of feedback. But there was a time, I read The Purpose-Driven Life, and I was trying to go through steps like that. So I went to a close friend and I asked them to give me some feedbacks on things that I could change. And he refused. So, that's why I was saying you got to find the right people, and you got to have those people willing to give you the feedback too. So,
yeah. Let's talk a little bit about self-reflection. Masha, you started us off with that because, as you said, you're actually taking this week to do some self-reflection, to step back from the busy day-to-day life. Brian, how about you? What does self-reflection look like in this context of trying to find your purpose?
how do you define self-reflection? To me, it's kind of self-explanatory.
Okay, so maybe the clarifying question
is,
on. Yeah. How do you find the time, or how do you get away to be able to do it?
Well, we live in an RV. We don't necessarily travel a lot, and we're staying in places where there's not a lot of friends and family most of the time. So that gives us lots of time for self-reflection.
Yes. And we've done a lot of that. We've done a lot of exploring, and, we've walked the dogs, and we've done some talking as we've gone through our burnout recovery that year that we took a sabbatical. And I think that having that time and that space, in a sense, from the busyness of life has contributed for us as well. So the third area to consider is experiences. And I'm curious on this one. How do you feel, particularly with this one? What would you say to someone who's maybe our age? So we're Gen X and millennials. And, you've gone through life, you have quite a bit of experience, but what if you still don't feel like you have an experience that you're like, oh yeah, that was it. I have found my purpose. How can people use experiences or new experiences to try to find their purpose?
Well, I think that's going back to the drawing board. There are lots of different questionnaires you can fill out of things that you like, things you don't like, things you used to dream of as a child, and consider those things. I think it's actually fairly simple. I think it's going back to your original authentic self. And most of us found ourselves in that childhood space. What did you want to do when you grow up, right? Ask yourself the same questions. What do you want to do when you grow up? Talking to your inner child and see what they say. I've always wanted to be a doctor, like always. Brain surgery was like fascinating. Neuroscience was extremely stimulating. I didn't get a chance to become a doctor, but I work in medicine. I still give a life of service in a industry that I love and I enjoy. And I feel like I'm bringing value, right? But there's also a whole different side of me. There is a creative side of me that I never was able to tap into when I was doing the boring old healthcare administration, right? So how do I do that? I do more things that bring me joy in the creative space. And Rekindle XM brings that satisfaction, worthy ideal, and purpose and passion of serving community in a creative way that I can never do professionally. So it could be a combination of things, but going back to the drawing board, who are you? What did you want to do when you grow up? Still, what do you want to do when you grow up from currently who you are? Because we are different today than we were yesterday. What direction are you headed on the course that you're on? Self-reflection gets you those answers.
And yes, it does. But I also like the fact that it's not always what you're doing in your job, because you just talked about that. Sometimes it's what you're doing outside of your job, your volunteer, your work, or your side hustle, or your passion project that maybe you're not even getting paid to do. But I think there are other ways beyond just our the day-to-day work that we do that we can get those experiences. I know that one of the things that's mentioned a lot is go out and do some kind of volunteer work, because you'll meet new people, you'll get different perspectives, or go out and join some kind of group that maybe is a little different from what you've ever done before. So I think if you're still in that place where you're not sure, or maybe you have identified an overall worthy ideal and maybe you're just having a little trouble with getting it dialed down to a specific purpose, sometimes you can go out and seek those experiences or seek those people to learn more and to just be curious until you find that right fit for that time of life.
Careful. A word of caution before you expand the scope and start doing things that you may not have room in your life to do. Make room for that first and have very strong boundaries, because volunteers are always needed. And before you know, if you are awful with boundaries, like I was, volunteering can become a full-time job. And then it's hard to say no when you're in the midst of it, right? So be mindful about what and how you do things. Volunteering is incredible. I have been volunteering every weekend for the last 5 years, and it brings me peace and joy. It did get overwhelming at one point because there's never enough people to do something, and you can help, but then it does take a chip from someplace else in your life. So yes, it's a good way to meet people, but also be careful. If you're in burnout, you may not be in any position to serve. You just may not until you recover. So don't put the cart before the horse. Go with the horse and the cart behind you.
Yes, words of wisdom from someone who knows. As Masha, yes, I know how busy your volunteer activities were, and since you've stepped back a little, you're still volunteering, but you've stepped back the intensity. So yes, that is something to keep in mind, is we can't just go out and experience or try to experience everything in order to find our purpose. We have to keep some balance there. All right, and let's move on to some practical tips for finding your worthy ideal. We've actually talked about the first one. So the first one is you have to find some time alone and get free from distractions. So Masha, for you, that looks like you're flying across the country and finding a beach sometimes.
Yes, beach is definitely one of those things. I'm a water person. I need water, I need sand, I need sunshine. Give me 3 days, I'm bouncing back up. Since in burnout, I need more like 3 weeks instead of 3 days, but I'm slowly normalizing and getting there. But I think the key element to getting there is not just changing the location. Because if you change your location and keep all your habits, it doesn't matter where you are. You're still going to be where you've been, right? It's just going to follow you through. So for me, the big thing is just turning off the distractions, turning off the busy, meaning that there's no social media scrolling, there's no excessive telephone time, talking to people that, can wait until I'm back from vacation. It is literally leaving all of your responsibilities and recharging, giving yourself that time to over fill your cup, because when we serve people a lot of times, especially the service oriented empaths that we serve from the space of reserves. Our batteries are done and we have very little reserve, and we tend to serve out of that. But we need to keep our cups full, keep our batteries charged, and serve from the overflow of that energy, an overflow of that grace that you have to give, not the reserves that you need to really keep for yourself and rebound back.
Yeah, I think that you point out a good reason to make sure we get that time alone, because even if we are living out our purpose and we know what our worthy ideal is, we still have to make sure that we are serving and fulfilling our purpose out of a filled cup, not an empty cup. So yeah, absolutely. And Brian, for you and I, obviously we have lots of alone time without distractions because we are out all over the country in different campgrounds, and we choose the places that are natural, that are away from the big cities. So that's our way to do it. But, it doesn't have to be that. You don't have to go out. You don't have to travel across the country. You don't have to go like we do and just leave the city and go out in the middle of nowhere. Brian, what other strategies can you use to find some time alone and get free from distractions? And I'm thinking about some that we've employed while we're here in Denver visiting family.
Right. Even before I was married, I would go into the mountains for a drive by myself, find a place where nobody was, park, sit in the back of my vehicle, read, I didn't really journal a lot. I'd write some poems. I'd just think about what was going on. I'd spend time in prayer, and that type of thing. But that also kind of helps you focus and kind of get you going in ideas and where you want your purpose to go.
Yeah, so it can be as simple as going for a drive. Another strategy that Brian and I use is just going to a park. A lot of times you can find a park nearby where you can kind of get away from all of the busyness around you. And honestly, sometimes, and Masha, I know that you've done this as well, sometimes it's finding your nearest coffee shop. I won't mention any names, but we all know what those are and where they're at. Sometimes even though there may be a lot of people, you still get that vibe of being able to get away from your day-to-day distractions. Sometimes that can work as well. So there's ways to do that, to find some time alone, get free from distractions, even if it's just a few minutes. The second practical tip.
One thing,
Masha, go ahead.
I just want to say one common denominator. None of those things are going to happen on their own. The commonality between all those strategies is being intentional, putting it on your calendar, schedule some time, identify what kind of rest you need, and put it in. If it's not on your calendar, and I tell this to everybody who knows me, if it's not on my calendar, it doesn't exist. It doesn't. And I have to put blocks. Sometimes I just put drive with Lex. We like to get lost and find our way out, find new roads. And it's a form of rest for us. We love road trips too. So good call out, Brian.
The second strategy, which we've talked about a little bit, is to write your discoveries down. I found this to be really powerful when I was going through the book, 48 Days to Work You Love. There was a free download that you could get that would walk you through and give you questions. And I found that I learned so much more when I actually took the time to write down my answers, because we can think about it in our head. We can think about our purpose. We can think about our worthy ideal. But I believe that writing it down helps us gain clarity. What do you guys think about that?
I think in addition to it,
if you enjoy journaling,
well, even if you don't enjoy journaling, I have a comment to that too, is if you don't write down your discoveries and your breakthroughs, you're going to forget them. And then you're going to have to go through the same thing again. Like I've gone recently through my journals through 2015. Yes, I did keep them. I should probably, do something with them at this point. But I was curious. I wanted to find the state of my mindset, and I wanted to find out what has changed between then and now. And I've written down my discoveries, and I was like, whoa, there's so many great ideas that I did implement into my life, but there's still so much more I haven't, and I completely forgotten about it. So it was a way for me to kind of like regather those marbles and keep them close and see, okay, do they still bring value to the life I want to create, to consider or not? Because you'll be surprised how many great ideas come and go. If you don't capture them, they're gone.
Okay, Masha, just before I let Brian go, but we work in the medical field, and when it comes to documentation, it's basically like if you didn't write it down, it didn't happen. So if the doctor doesn't put it in his note, the nurse doesn't put it in their note, it never happened. But it's funny because you're right, Masha. If I don't write it down, it's like it never happened. My brain just forgets it.
Don't you love it when you're falling asleep and you have these ideas, but you're just way too lazy to pick up the pen and paper, and you're like, I'm going to remember it in the morning. Nope. The times I did jump on it,
No.
I just keep a piece of paper and pen by my bed now all the time, because I know if a good idea comes, I have to write it down. And sure enough, when I written it down, I'm like, I have no recollection of this. But some great ideas come to you in the middle of the night. If you don't play the lazy card, you'll be surprised to the enlightenment you'll wake up to in the morning.
You can't say it's lazy if you don't enjoy journaling. It's just not enjoying journaling.
Lights out, you're falling asleep.
But I think we call it journaling, but I don't think you don't have to journal. It can be as simple as, a thought comes to you. Maybe you remember something that you loved to do as a kid, or that you wanted to do or be as an adult. Just write it down on a sticky note. Or it doesn't necessarily have to be journaling. It can just be something written quick.
I'm not saying anything against that, but not everybody enjoys doing that. So writing down your discoveries is fine, but if you don't keep them somewhere, which is generally a journal or a notebook to put the stickies in, it's of no use anyway, because they're just going to get lost.
I have a solution to this. There's two
point.
things. Back in the day, a couple of years ago, oh my goodness, more than a couple of years ago, I think my daughter was right after the divorce. So my daughter was 7, and I learned something. I learned about a dream box. I'm like, what is a dream box? So whatever you want to do in the next decade or whatnot, a year, you write down on a little piece of paper and put it inside the dream box. So it became a tradition for my daughter and I, and once a year, right around Christmas time, we go through all of our dreams. Okay, this came true, these didn't come true. So we have a dream box of, we keep it in one place. It's incredible. And this year, we were going through my grandma's house, and we found this beautiful crystal box. And I wanted to hold on to it, but it has no obvious purpose. And I was thinking, like, what can I make of this? Because I wanted it on display. And then an idea came to me. This is going to be our joy box. Everything that we're grateful for that came to fruition, that we're really excited about, we're just going to draw it down to be grateful for and put it in that little jar and look at it also once a year. So there's other ways. Instead of using a journal, you can do a strategy like a dream box or a joy box. And, it keeps you motivated. Every time we look at it and we open it up, we just have great memories, great laughs.
Okay. So those in the audience that really like that method, be sure to comment on it. And if those that are boohoo people like me and don't enjoy journaling or writing things down, like I never did during work or anything else.
Well, and it could be there are other ways to remember. So, and Brian has an engineering mind. The truth is he doesn't forget things like the rest of us. So he might actually be able to remember the things that he thinks about and decides, versus Masha and I, who it's like, if we don't write it down, it's gone. So yeah, let us know if there's another way. But I'm also going to call you out, Brian, because now we do take a little notebook with us almost everywhere that we use for various things. But you do actually write.
There's
it's
a
just
difference
not a journal.
for journaling when you're trying to work versus journaling on the side or just writing things down on the side. I would be interested to know what the percentage of people is that actually write things down when they're trying to find their worthy ideals, and those who are journaling versus people that don't write things down or journal at all.
All right. So we have another perspective on that. But yes, I'm really curious if people have other things that you perhaps do. You don't write it down, but it helps you remember. All right. So ongoing debate there. And final tip is revisit often. And I think where that comes from is as we go through life, our experiences are continuing to expand. We continue to meet new people. we continue to grow in most situations. So what your worthy ideal is today may grow, change, modify as you go through life. What are your thoughts on revisiting that worthy ideal and our purpose on a regular basis?
Well, we've already been experiencing that ourselves. We've had to constantly revisit what we want out of Rekindle XM and the book that we've written, which is Rekindle. And we're constantly having to remind ourselves what we're trying to do and who we're trying to serve and how we're trying to get there. It's week to week if it's not day to day. So especially when things seem to be slowing down and you don't feel like you're getting there as quickly as you'd like to, that's when you really have to keep reminding yourself and have that faith that it's there. And it helps that if you have a faith in God as well. I mean, that's kind of how three of us survive through this, is our belief in God and then our belief in what we're trying to do. But you have to have belief in something. So you can't do anything without a belief in something. And you do have to revisit it often.
And that's why it has to exist for some place I can look at, and it's not in the ether.
I can't help it that you don't have the memory that I do.
The problem is I just have way too many great ideas and I get lost shuffling through all of them. So I need some clarity and direction, and just writing it down helps. I'm not going to go into goals conversation here, but that's another mine.
Okay.
But I think it is
and if you like to throw up on paper to get all those ideas out,
it
then
works. And then highlight through things like, oh my goodness, if I show you something, it's going to be fun to see your reaction.
Yes,
Absolutely.
but we need to land that plane.
Do what works for you. I think revisiting is important, because ideas you may have had a year or 5 years ago may no longer be in alignment with your worthy ideal and your purpose, because you have evolved to a new plane of understanding of yourself with help of others, or maybe on your own, or in a conference. That's another thing that you could do. I've done some workshops over the weekends that helped my growth and helped me overcome, the old self that was stuck into the new self, who has faith and the ability to do the things that I now prioritize, because they are the driving force of life that worthy ideal is.
All right. So some debate on those practical tips, but again, it's to find time alone, free from distractions. 2, write your discoveries down or have a really good memory of what those are. 3, revisit often.
And occasionally write those things down.
And occasionally, okay. And Masha's
Next
clapping.
Podcast,
She's like,
I'm gonna wear a shirt. Don't argue with me. I'm always right.
No,
all right.
You can wear it, but you'll be wrong.
It is time to land the plane. So we do invite our listeners to let us know in the comments if you have found your worthy ideal, or are you still currently searching for it? And if you have found it, what is it? And what steps are you taking to achieve it? Thank you, and we look forward to visiting with you next time.